Тепер я прошу до слова. У нас сьогодні на одну доповідь менше, бо Якуб Нєдзвіць не мав можливості долучитись до нас сьогодні, виступав ще в понеділок. І тому зараз я прошу до слова Марію-Ґрацію Бартоліні. Марія-Ґрація, я дуже прошу до нас долучитися. Ми вас не бачимо.
Я тут. Ви бачите мой PowerPoint, так?
Так.
Добре. The second half of the 17th century was a period of intense religious, social, and political turmoil for Ukraine. After the agreement of Pereyaslav, which resulted in the political union of the Cossack-controlled territory of Ukraine with the Tsardom of Muscovy, the Kiev Orthodox clergy faced the problem of preserving the rights and privileges of the Kievan Church in relation to the Moscow Church, while attempting to stabilize their position under the patronage of the Moscow Tsar. Today, I will examine how Kiev Orthodox intellectuals used the image of the Tree of Jesse, along with that of Prince Vladimir, to defend the rights of their church, while simultaneously pleasing the major political actors in the region. The texts I will use are the titular engravings of Lazar Baranovych's sermon collection, Mech, dukhovnyi, printed in Kiev in 1666, and his sermon on Saint Vladimir, contained in the collection Trubislavia Sprapovednych, printed in Kiev in 1674. Both Mech, dukhovnyi and Trubi were written in Czechoslovak for a wider Slavic audience. Both had forewords addressed to the Tsar, Alexei Mikhailovich, bearing stamp of Baranovych efforts to strike a careful balance between local, Kievan, and supranational concerns, the need to win the Tsar's patronage. And what I want to argue is that these texts convey slightly different messages for viewers and readers, depending on the position they occupy within the new political relationships between Moscow and Kiev. So let us start my analysis with a close reading of the engravings in the frontispiece of Mech, dukhovnyi. On the lower terrestrial level of this three-tiered image, Vladimir is represented lying on the ground, and issuing from his head is a quotation from Psalm 1:3, and it shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. From his side grows a vine, rising to the first of Alexei Mikhailovich's sons, Simeon, whose figure carries the central axis of the tree up to his brothers Fyodor and Alexei and his parents, Alexei and Maria Ilyinichna, which jointly occupy the topmost branches. Over the tree is an inscription with a quotation from Psalm 111, the generation of the upright, Rod Pravi, shall be blessed. The Romanov family tree, growing from a reclining Vladimir, is an adaptation of the Tree of Jesse, which is usually interpreted as representing the genealogical tree of Christ. However, in the frontispiece of Mech, dukhovnyi, Vladimir takes Jesse's place as the root from which the Tsar Christ grows. And this, in turn, implies a specific role in the story of salvation for Vladimir, which is a point to which I shall return later. Such adaptations of the Tree of Jesse for the purposes of dynastic praise, along with the practice of substituting Jesse with other figures, were not infrequent in medieval and early modern Europe. In the Slavic Orthodox world, an example is the genealogical tree of the Romanich dynasty, which was used to visually express the divine succession of the Serbian monarchy. From Serbia, it must have passed to Muscovy, where the Tree of Jesse was used in the Annunciation Court Cathedral as early as 1405. And given its dynastic association, it is not surprising that Baranovych would use the Tree of Jesse iconography in conjunction with the Romanovs in a book designed as much for the Moscow market as for the Ukrainian one. The metaphor of Vladimir being the root of a tree of pious royal descendants, Koryan Благочестию, themselves characterized as good roots or branches, is indeed a leitmotif of the Book of Royal Degrees, Stipendaya Kniga, which portrays Ivan IV as the culmination of a line of succession starting from Vladimir. And now let's go back for a moment to our image and to the central tire of the image, where we have two scenes to the left and right, which depict a crowned eagle with its eaglets, with a quotation from Isaiah 40, "They shall mount up with wings as eagles," and a dragon-slain horseman, with a quotation from Psalm 17:38, "I have pursued my enemies and overtaken them." The St. George-like question has no halo, but has a crown, which is strikingly reminiscent of that of the earthly rulers portrayed in the engraving. And surmounting the tree are images of Christ and Mary, surrounded by golden rays. And between Christ and the Virgin, and right above the tree, is the coat of arms of the Romanovs, a double-headed triple-crowned eagle with a crescent under its feet. This reference to the woman of the apocalypse, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, appears to be corroborated by a modified quotation from Revelation 12 in the banderole, and the moon under his feet, meaning the eagle's feet. The two-headed eagle has a representation of a dragon-slain horseman on its breast, as in the frontispiece of the 1661 Kievan Paterik and of the 1663 Moscow Bible. Above the eagle is a shining cross with the inscription, "In this sign thou shalt conquer," Sem znameni pobjedaješi, an allusion to the victory of Constantine at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge against pagan enemy forces. The identification of Alexei Mikhailovich as the new Constantine was an important component of Muscovite political theology and court rhetoric. And so the engraving draws on this established parallel to connect three figures. Constantine, the first Orthodox ruler, triumphant against the enemies of Christianity; Vladimir, the second Constantine, who converted Rus to Christianity; and Alexei, the new Constantine. Tsar Alexei's military power, symbolized by the dragon-slain horseman and the eagle, both capped with the royal crown, is shown vanquishing the infidels, just like his predecessors. In fact, in the foreword addressed to the Tsar, Baranovych explains that the moon under the eagle's feet represents the barbarians, Luna всех варваров у вас под ногами. And barbarians is a term that includes the major religious others at that time, Turks and Tatars. And finally, on the upper celestial level of the engraving, a heavenly hand bestows 3 crowns. Baranovych again explains in the foreword to the Tsar that God, who has many crowns, as in Revelation 19:12, gives his earthly anointed Alexei Mikhailovich the 3 crowns in imitation of the Trinity. So, as we can see from this brief description, the frontispiece of Mech dukhovnyi presents the princes of Moscow as divinely anointed and as branches of the tree originating from the Kievan prince Vladimir. However, my contention is that this image does not only or does not simply make a specific statement about the importance of the ruler's clan or about the Romanovs' right to inherit Kiev and the Ukrainian lands because of an unbroken chain of descent from Prince Vladimir to Tsar Alexei. And in this respect, we should keep in mind that Mech dukhovnyi circulated widely in both Muscovite Russia and Ukraine. And so it represents one side of the conversation that took place between different groups of readers and viewers. And here, Baranovych moves in two directions. On the one hand, he uses a symbolic system that reflects the ideological constructs of 17th century Muscovy, as they are expressed in the Book of Royal Degrees or in the frontispiece of the 1663 Moscow Bible. On the other hand, as we will see in the last part of this paper, he infuses the work with contents that reflect the political and cultural tradition of the Kiev clergy, who would bring their own values and expectations to this picture. So what story is Baranovych telling his supranational audience? In combining the tree of Jesse with references to the Book of Revelation, he creates a narrative that envisions Prince Vladimir and Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich as actors in the sacred history that begins with Christ's incarnation and culminates in his second coming at the Last Judgment. And the lower level, two elements serve as emblems of Christ's nativity. First, the tree of Jesse, an illustration of Isaiah's prophecy of Christ's incarnation, and secondly, Psalm 111, the generation of the upright shall be blessed, which is one of the antiphons prescribed for the offices of Christmas Day. The coming of the Messiah, foreshadowed by Vladimir Jesse, is made explicit in the images of Christ and his mother in the two rondels in the upper level, which mirrored those of Alexei and his wife on the topmost branches of the tree, reinforcing the role of Alexei as a type of Christ. On the upper level, the crescent under the eagle's feet and the accompanying reference to the woman clothed with the sun in Revelation 12 provide a reminder of the apocalyptic union to come between Christ, the bridegroom, and his faithful. This sophisticated interplay of imagery associated with Christ and the apocalypse in relation to the Tsar can only be properly assessed if we consider the contemporary situations in Muscovy and in Ukraine. Concerns about the imminence of the Last Judgment and the appearance of the Antichrist were widespread during the 17th century. The apocalypse, according to one calculation, the apocalypse was predicted in 1666, which not incidentally is also the year when Mech dukhovnyi appeared in print. In this respect, it is probably not surprising that specific apocalyptic ideas in relation to the Tsar resonate also in the title page of the collection, which partially elucidates the frontispiece. Let me briefly describe some parts of this title page. The upper layer shows a horseman similar to that of the frontispiece, a possible symbol of Tsar Alexei, surrounded by a group of haloed figures riding white horses. The quotations in the banderoles and the armies that were in heaven followed him upon white horses, and his name is called the Word of God, are drawn from chapter 19 of the book of Revelation, which marks the culmination of the battle between God and Satan, further stressing the link between Christ triumphant during his second coming and Tsar Alexei. The lower level shows this cosmic battle as two ships facing each other, one headed by Christ and the Archangel Michael, and the other by the Antichrist. A similar eschatological orientation and the substantial overlapping between Vladimir and Alexei Mikhailovich as apocalyptic fighters lies behind Baranovych's sermon on Vladimir, which appeared in print in 1674 when Kiev was expecting an Ottoman-led assault and the Poles demanded the return of the city to the Commonwealth. There, Baranovych uses Revelation 3:21, "To him that overcomes will I grant to sit with me in my throne," to identify Vladimir victorious over the pagan idols with Christ triumphant in the apocalypse, a biblical reference that brings to mind the representation of Alexei Mikhailovich as the Lord of Heavenly Host in the title page of Mech dukhovnyi. The association between Vladimir and the Muscovite Tsar is further emphasized in the engraving opening the sermon, which addresses the medieval prince in the Byzantine regalia, the orb, the embroidered robe, that characterize Alexei's official portrait from the early 1670s. In this engraving, Vladimir, styled as Alexei and destroying the pagan idols with a cross, can be seen as a prefiguration of Alexei defending Kiev against Turkish attack, a notion that is reinforced by the curious detail of the crescent-like shapes over the idols' heads. So we see that Baranovych creates a political and religious discourse that stresses one of the tenets of the ideology of the Muscovite state that was central also for the Kiev clergy, the role of the Tsar as a patron of the Orthodox Church against the enemies of Christianity. The crescent and the dragon-slaying horsemen reinforce this paradigm of sacred violence, while pointing to the Muscovite Tsardom as a universal monarchy that would lead to the establishment on earth of the kingdom of God after the defeat of the Antichrist. But what might the reaction of the readers in Ukraine in the Hetmanate have been? Confronted with a continuous period of war and foreign invasion, Ukrainian Orthodox clergy could have found spiritual comfort and an answer to their sense of anxiety in the apocalyptic triumph of Tsar Alexei. However, the support the Ukrainian clergy offered the Muscovite Tsar was subject to certain conditions, which included the confirmation of the rights and freedom of the Kiev Orthodox Church and the guarantee that it remained under the jurisdiction of the Patriarchate of Constantinople. And for Baranovych, the welfare of the church and its independence from Moscow were an overwhelming concern, one that shows itself in the frontispiece of Mech dukhovnyi. And of central interest to my discussion is, again, the image of the tree of Jesse. If we look at tree imagery in other works by Baranovych, we will see that it is used to designate the Orthodox faith received by Prince Vladimir from Constantinople and the need to protect it from external threats. In the foreword to the Tsar, it writes that the tree in the frontispiece was planted by the waters of the holy baptism of Vladimir. And the Romanov eagle, it continues, has made its nest on this tree, which symbolizes the triumphant faith, Vera Pobeduyashaya, an explanation that spiritualizes the metaphor of the family tree that is central to both the Book of Royal Degrees and the Tree of Jesse iconography. The close association of the tree with the Christian Orthodox faith is further emphasized in the sermon on Vladimir, where Baranovych argues that before baptism, Vladimir was like an arid and infertile land, земля безводная и неплодная. And after finding the Orthodox faith in Constantinople, a tree grew from that land, and the Kievan church found a lodge in its branches. This tree, Baranovych continues, should be protected from the axe that is laid onto the root, another reference to the sense of pending apocalypse. Radzivilowski's sermons from this very period also insist on Constantinople as the source of the Christianity brought to Kiev by Vladimir, using the image of the tree planted by the rivers of water to represent the faith found by Vladimir in Constantinople. Thus, for the Kiev Orthodox hierarchies, the tree and this frontispiece might have symbolized the ancient and distinguished heritage of their own spiritual community, the Kievan Church, which took its origins from Vladimir and from the Eastern Church in Constantinople. The Tsar, whom the frontispiece establishes as the champion of Orthodoxy, should protect this tree while preserving its continuing subordination to the Patriarchate of Constantinople. And in tracing the contours of a spiritual community, the tree in the frontispiece also illustrates the permanency of the mystical body, the corpus mysticum of the Kiev Church, which inhabits an endless continuum stretching from its founder, Vladimir, to its current patron, the Moscow Tsar. Vladimir is the head, or rather the root, whose perpetuity is crucial to its welfare. And in conclusion, far from unambiguously praising the Tsar and the organic growth of his dynastic lineage, the frontispiece and title page of Mech dukhovnyi emerge as a site where ecclesiastical ideas about politics and Orthodox political culture in particular could flow between readers in both Kiev and Moscow, allowing for subtle slippages of signification that contributed to the difference that distinguishes Muscovite and Kievan culture. Thank you.